In geopolitics, countries are forced to gamble on new initiatives, groundbreaking policies, projects worth millions of dollars. Some work, some don't. But for an aspiring superpower like India, the need to gamble remains. July 2022. A cargo shipment departs from Astrakhan port in Russia's southwest, heading to Mumbai's Jawaharlal Nehru port. This wasn't just another shipment. It was the first test of a corridor that's been in the making for over 2 decades. A 7,000-kilometer network that could change the game entirely. This is the International North-South Transport Corridor, and it might be the most ambitious trade route you've never heard of. The question is, in a world obsessed with China's Belt and Road Initiative, has everyone forgotten about this one? Let's rewind to understand why this matters. Historically, India was connected to China, Afghanistan, and Central Asia through the ancient Silk Route, stretching through Ladakh, Taxila, Peshawar, and parts of Gujarat. Then 1947 happened. Pakistan's creation severed these land trade routes overnight. For over 7 decades, the resource-rich markets of Central Asia have been largely out of India's reach. Fast forward to the year 2000. India, Russia, and Iran come together with a vision: create a multimodal transport corridor connecting the Indian Ocean with Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. More than 13 countries sign on as members. The promise? Cut shipping time by 40% and costs by 30% compared to the traditional route. Think about it. Right now, Indian goods headed to Europe travel through the Gulf of Aden, the Suez Canal, across the Mediterranean, into the Atlantic, and finally to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. When the Suez Canal was blocked for just 6 days in 2021, it cost the global economy $9 billion. Fast forward to the Israel-Hamas war. Houthis in Yemen started blocking ships in the Red Sea, forcing vessels to take the longer route around Africa. The region is perpetually unstable. The INSTC offered an alternative, a faster, cheaper, more resilient route that bypasses these volatile choke points entirely. But more importantly, it was India's answer to its extended neighborhood strategy. The Connect Central Asia policy aimed at countering growing Chinese influence in the region. Here's the uncomfortable truth. While India has been struggling with this 7,000-kilometer corridor for 22 years, China has built the Belt and Road Initiative spanning 70 countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa. The scale isn't even comparable. China has invested over $1 trillion in BRI. Meanwhile, the INSTC can't even secure proper funding for a single railway line in Armenia. For India, this isn't just about trade routes, it's about survival as a regional power. China is encircling India, from Pakistan's Gwadar port to Sri Lanka's Hambantota, from Myanmar to the Maldives. Central Asia, historically India's backyard, is now dominated by Chinese investment and influence. India needs to grow. It needs to project power. It needs alternatives to Chinese infrastructure. The INSTC was supposed to be that alternative. India's pathway to cheap Russian and Central Asian energy, its gateway to European markets, its tool for regional influence. But somewhere between 2000 and now, the world moved on. New crises emerged, and the INSTC became a forgotten project, buried under more urgent headlines. The corridor consists of 4 major branches. The Central Corridor runs from Mumbai to Iran's Bandar Abbas, up to Bandar Anzali, across the Caspian Sea to Russia's Astrakhan, and finally to Moscow and St. Petersburg. The Western Corridor goes through Azerbaijan, connecting Iran through Baku to Russia. The Eastern Route, India's priority, connects Central Asian republics, running through Tehran to Ashgabat, Tashkent, and Almaty. India wants to integrate its Chabahar port here, opening doors to Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. the Armenia corridor threads through to Georgian ports and Eastern Europe. On paper, it's brilliant. In reality, it's a geopolitical minefield. Here's where everything falls apart. First, the money. Projects like this require billions. The Kazakhstan-Turkmenistan-Iran railway alone costs $620 million. But most funding comes from neighboring countries lending to each other or taking loans. Private investment? Almost none. Why? Fragile states, terrorism concerns, and internal conflicts. Then there are sanctions. When the US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, global companies fled Iranian infrastructure projects. Major financial institutions won't touch most INSTC projects due to fears of secondary sanctions. Russia's war in Ukraine brought similar sanctions down on Moscow. The two main promoters of the corridor, Russia and Iran, can't even invest properly in their own project. They're international pariahs, cut off from global financial systems. And then come the conflicts. Turkey and Armenia can't cooperate due to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Georgia's railway isn't fully involved because of the Abkhazia dispute with Russia. Ukraine was a member. Now it's at war with Russia, threatening the entire northern section. Syria's conflict makes expansion there impossible. Again, coming back to Turkey, the biggest anti-India narrator on the global stage is just a member for the sake of the name. Add to that Iran's own internal turmoil, protests, economic collapse, political instability. A country that can barely keep its own economy afloat is supposed to be a transit hub for international trade? Sounds funny enough. Here's what nobody wants to admit. India conducted a test run in April 2017. By 2018, only 11 million tons of goods had been transported through the corridor. That's nothing. A rounding error in global trade. The corridor needs uniform tariffs across all member countries. It doesn't have them. It needs strong institutions to handle operational issues. It doesn't have those either. It needs massive infrastructure investments. Those aren't coming. And most critically, it needs demand. High demand for Indian products in European and Russian markets to justify billions in investment. That demand is uncertain at best. With everything happening in the world, the INSTC has been pushed to the back burner. Forgotten. Neglected. If India is serious about countering China, if it wants energy security, if it aims to project power in Central Asia and beyond, the INSTC needs to be revived. Not as a side project, but as a strategic priority. The infrastructure, incomplete as it is, exists. The agreements are signed. The framework is there. What's missing is political will. And money. Lots of money. India needs to step up as the primary financier, even if it means taking on more risk. It needs to push harder on member states to resolve their disputes. It needs to find creative ways around sanctions, perhaps through non-dollar transactions, perhaps through neutral intermediaries. This corridor represents more than just trade efficiency. It represents India's ambition to be taken seriously as a global power. It's an attempt to carve out strategic autonomy in a world dominated by the US and China. The question isn't whether the INSTC can work. The question is whether India wants it badly enough to make it work. Because in the end, the biggest problem with the international north-south transport corridor isn't the corridor itself. It's whether anyone still remembers to care. We are the Forage. If you enjoyed this content, do support us by liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel for more such geopolitical case studies. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.